All right, well, welcome everyone to Town Hall. We have a bit of an adjustment in our usual schedule and calendar this evening. We're going to have a workshop with the Complete Streets Committee, which has a timely urgency to it. Liz, we're going to open it up for your committee to make a presentation, or whoever you've got designated, so that we can get this item particularly taken care of, which requires a council vote. And we have about a half an hour for the committee workshop, but if we need more time, we can stretch it a little bit. So we're here to listen.
Yeah, so we've been working for a few years on trying to develop a pathway, basically from the YMCA up to Pine Street. And we wanted it to be off-road, but you know, there's a lot of different properties back there and a lot to consider. And so we got a grant to get some help, you know, to look at that. So that has produced Lucy Gibson, and I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to give a little presentation on some of the options that she has come up with.
Great, thank you. Unmute Zoom. No.
I guess while we're waiting, I'll let you know that she's going to be presenting, at least last I heard, 3 options. One is the off-road option, which is what our committee has been pushing. Another is something on Route 1, which, you know, we already have a wide lane on Route 1, so I don't know if that's something the committee was really looking for. And then the third is a hybrid. So as soon as she...
Yeah, we're just working out the logistics so that we can get the presentation on the screen.
Sent it, I think I sent it to...
Should I share my slides from on the Zoom screen, or?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Lucy, do you have them, or do you want us to pull them up?
I have them ready to go, if that would be easier.
Yep, I would go ahead and do that if that works for you.
Oh, I just got disabled screen sharing. Let me try again. I'm not able to share my screen when I, oh,
If you go to the arrow
Lucy, I think we're working on it.
and then say multiple participants. There you go.
Try that. Try that one.
there we go.
All right, success.
Okay, does that look?
Yes, we can see them.
You able to see slideshow? Great. Well, thank you so much for making the time to talk about this project tonight. I'm Lucy Gibson. I'm with Tool Design. I'm a transportation engineer out of the Boston office. And I elected to appear virtually just so we have more of our time and effort to spend on doing some of the work that we have. I think I have a short set of slides I'd like to go through and then really get your feedback, input, answer questions. Can be pretty open-ended. But I think I know you got a little introduction project. I wasn't able to hear all of it, but basically the project goals were to explore alternatives for the downtown connector that would connect downtown Freeport to eventually the bridge over the Yarmouth, and to then coordinate and build on other projects. One of the things that was in the early articulation of this project was to think about the Beth Condon path as maybe an example to consider for this project. Another important feature of it is that it would be a link on the East Coast Greenway, and that comes with some sort of design, philosophy, and recommendations. And that as part of our study, we'll look at alternative routes and costs and surface types. And this is the, I think, sort of the genesis of the idea that came out of the Freeport downtown master plan. So it was not a very detailed look, but just the concept of a off-road path parallel to Route 1 that would connect places in Freeport, but do it in a way that off the road in a more appealing natural environment. And, you know, the line drawn on this particular map just followed property boundaries, not with any real specific, you know, enough analysis to know where exactly the trail should go, but certainly kind of identified the corridor that we'd be looking at. Again, the vision that we heard from quite a few people was that having something that's in the woods or outdoors, away from traffic, not right along Route 1, was again and again something that was an aspiration for the project, even though realizing that it might not be possible for the entire length or maybe not possible right away. And the East Coast Greenway does provide some design guidelines and, you know, very much compatible with the vision of the trail. So we did a process. I'll run through real quickly the process we looked at. When we started the project, Adam Bliss was on board as the town engineer, and we worked with him and then a committee of Barbara McGuffin and Andrew Spalding to map out some initial options to consider that would make that connection. And this was an initial investigation that had just different points and different routes that could make the connection between basically the Desert Road Bridge on the north and the Cousins Bridge over to Yarmouth on the south and connecting the YMCA. We then, as we looked at all the different routes, we set up some evaluation criteria to help us figure out which of these would be the most feasible, most buildable, and most appealing to ride of the options. So some of the things that we looked at was related to topography, the steepness of the trail, but also the steepness of the land that the trail would be crossing. If you're going across a steep slope, you know, the trail may not be steep, but the construction cost could be quite a bit higher. Then we also looked at the total amount of climbing from end to end, the total length of the trail. You know, while a trail in the woods can be somewhat circuitous, we want it to still be something that could be used as a, you know, transport from A to B, so not too far out of the way. Is there a question, or if anyone? I'll keep going and we'll stop at the end of questions, but maybe anyone wants to interrupt me, raise hand or let me know. Connections to destinations along Route 1 was also a consideration, so we wanted to have several options throughout the corridor to access Route 1. And then we, of course, wanted to avoid environmental resource, including wetlands or properties with land uses that might be incompatible with trail use. So after taking those initial lines and then sort of screening them out based on topography and making a little bit more realistic options, we ended up with these 7 different routes to go from end to end on the corridor, plus a few light blue lines that are alternate routes. And we were, you know, trying to sort of limit having too many different options to look at, but these were the options that appeared most feasible for topography and all those other criteria that I mentioned. So then we did a evaluation matrix of, these are not all the criteria, but really some of the most important: the total length, the amount of climbing, the grade that exceeds 7%, which would be something that wouldn't meet ADA requirements, the grade that exceeds 5%, which means it would be more difficult to ride for someone who's not really fit or not on an e-bike, and then the steepness of the terrain. So those were all of a number of different criteria we looked at, and it's probably a little hard to tell from the graphic, but we did pick the top 3 to really look at more closely further that were the most feasible for these criteria. You can see there's a little less red. There's no red cells in the 3 that I've highlighted, and a little more in the green, which the green in this case is good conditions for trail. The red are serious constraints for the trail. So, and these are what the trail looked like. So one of the trails the one on the left side, Listwoods to Stagecoach, is completely off-road. I guess I shouldn't say totally completely, but mostly off-road, where the other two are used Route 1 for various lengths of the project. But for all those other features, these seem to be the most feasible. So a couple other things, and I'd really like to get, your thoughts as well, but we'll need to be getting a little more specific about how the trail would be designed and think about design users. In the case of a trail that would be an East Coast Greenway, you'd want to allow bikes, but also longer bikes that have trailers and, cargo bikes and that kind of thing, where families are tending to use that kind of bike more often. Another thing to think about is the surface type. There's many of these trails are either using stone dust. It's a lot of layers of compacted gravel, then a fine coat of stone dust on top that makes for a good riding surface and much less expensive than paved. But paved trails are also an option to consider. They're easier to maintain once you have the pavement, and especially for winter maintenance. So thoughts on those preferences would be helpful to know tonight. Another question to consider is sort of the level of accessibility standards. We have a lot of different sets of criteria we look at when we're designing public infrastructure. If this was to be a fully ADA compliant multi-use path, it would have more stringent requirements in terms of the maximum grade and the width and the amount of curvature than a trail that would be more like a mountain bike trail that is a little more rugged, more steep slopes, and then there's different shades in between. So we have to think about if the vision is for a family to be able to go on a bike ride, that more accessible trail is really a lot more compatible with that vision, where a mountain bike trail is something that many people won't really be able to take advantage of and use. And then a final comment to note is thinking about winter maintenance. This kind of trail could be great for cross-country skiing if that was preferred, or it could be cleared of snow in the winter and used year-round by bikes and walking. And depending on what you think are the most likely uses and whatnot, that things could go either way, and that might affect the design recommendations, particularly with respect to paving, because that's a little more compatible with clearing snow in the winter. And so we did look at Route 1, and I think the sense of the people we talked to on the committee was that Route 1, just a path along Route 1 doesn't really provide the type of experience that's envisioned by the trail project. There are already bike lanes, so it's not like Route 1 has no infrastructure for biking. It's not appealing for a less confident rider or, say, a family riding, but there are bike lanes. And that perhaps the better approach to Route 1 is to create more of a complete street corridor on Route 1 by adding a sidewalk, which would be much narrower footprint than trying to build out a shared use path parallel to Route 1. And then in that way, Route 1 would be served by both walking and biking. And again, it would provide the connection that if you had their off-road trail, you could get up to Route 1 through different connection points and then access businesses along Route 1. And these are the couple complete street options that we are evaluated on Route 1. So we have that existing cross section as the figure on the top is 12-foot lanes and 8-foot bike lanes. The shared use path option, which we're not really recommending, but we did explore, would be to actually narrow the bike lane on the northbound side and then use that space to stay within the right-of-way to create a shared use path. And then the third option, which is a recommendation for consideration, is keep the roadway pretty much the way it is and build out a sidewalk. There are many places along Route 1, which you probably know, where there's drainage ditches, utility poles. It's not going to be free and clear, always easy, but it's certainly a feasible kind of project. There may be some right-of-way impacts for if it's important to avoid, say, a drainage infrastructure or utilities, but it mostly would fit within the right-of-way. So our next steps, we are winding down at the end of the project. Because we The trail alignments are going to be partly subject to going forward, having conversations with landowners. It's unlikely, although this is another point to discuss tonight, that, not all the landowners along the routes of these trails have expressed support for the trail. Not all of them have even been approached. Some of the landowners may be, not well disposed or don't think the trail is compatible with their land. But over time, having a mapped trail route and with a few variations can help inform conversations going forward where you can, help refine by working with landowners what a feasible route of the trail would be. So our next step is to prepare a final report where we'll provide that kind of implementation plan and steps to go forward. We will look at both the potential trail alignments, trail cross sections, design criteria, surface types, and a rough cost estimate, and have an implementation plan that identifies funding sources and any right-of-way impacts that would need to be resolved. And then really to make the project come to a reality, there's fair number of ongoing work that will need to be done by the town of Freeport or citizens on the various committees, which is again to start those discussions with landowners about potential trail alignments. And as changes in land ownership or improvement projects are done that go through local review, those would be times to potentially discuss what might be, feasible to work in a trail easement for right of way. And in fact, some of that work has already been done in the past, that there are some trail easements on some of the properties in the area. And then a third item is to pursue a complete streets project on Route 1 that would provide a sidewalk in addition to the bike lanes. So that is all I have in my presentation. I'd be happy to entertain questions, and I will stop sharing my screen. But I'm also happy to pull up any information.
Thanks very much, very informative. Liz, is there a sort of a wrap-up for what's you're hoping for the council to hear or give feedback on, or?
We wanted to provide a little bit more feedback. I don't know if Barbara had gone to get some community input at a farmer's market, and she might want to share what she found. And then Kim might also want to present kind of the work that Casco Bay Trail is doing, because I guess there's some, did you want overlap that you might be interested in? And then Andy might also want to present just some history on this project.
Hi, so I'm Barbara Guffin, and we've been working on this for a while. Kim, if you could bring the study. So what Lucy showed us were the three alternatives. And so we were trying to get some input because I guess the committee's been working a long time on an off-road trail. It started with the Active Living Committee and the kinds of recreation needs that they wanted. So these were the three trails, again, that Lucy had presented. And we tried, so we asked the people who were at the farmer's market to provide some input into which of the three they would prefer. So we've got the Route 1 trail, we've got the one that has a little bit on Stagecoach Road. And then we have the third option, and overwhelmingly, again, it wasn't a lot of people, but it showed that people are very much interested in that.
Would you like to point to it?
Okay.
Take this with you, okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. I also want to read part of an email from Doug Leland. Doug Leland was the chair of Complete Streets a number of years ago and is pretty much helped change Freeport into becoming a complete streets town. And he's not here today because he's cycling in Massachusetts and Connecticut on a 70-mile uninterrupted off-road, fully paved, multi-use trail that hugs the Farmington River in Connecticut. And the point he's trying to make is that we don't know, or that people could come here. It would be an economic benefit to have trails like this. So, and people, we don't know what it's like because we haven't experienced it here in Freeport. So we're hoping that we could at least get a piece of a trail so that we can have that experience here. I think that's all. Thank you.
I have personally tried to ride my bike on Route 1 with my son, and it's not a pleasant experience.
Liz, do you know does the committee have an assessment of how many property owners we need to get right-of-way permissions from for the preferred route? In other words, trying to sort of measure up how feasible is the one that everybody wants in terms of actually being able to get it?
I think we've been working on that, and we don't have a firm number, and I maybe ballpark maybe 10. I mean, we know, and I think
Yeah, we do have
Andy
a
can,
list, and I'll share it. I didn't bring that along, but we have.
it's not that many.
Just trying to get a sense of the scale of how many different property owners you might need to negotiate with to try and get something.
Andy Spalding. I'm on the Connect Freeport work group, and I work with Complete Streets a fair bit. John, there are some really critical ones. There are 3 major ones that will get us the majority of the way from really South Freeport Road by Goodfire all the way to Pine Street, and then a couple smaller ones. We do have the unknown factor of the solar farm. I don't know if that's still going to happen. The owner of the once proposed solar farm was happily going to give us pretty much whatever they wanted, whatever we wanted. That was a direct quote from them. So that would have gotten us all the way from Pine Street to essentially where DeMello's is, the boatyard. So that's a big one. So 3 big ones, I would say, and a couple smaller.
Yeah, the list that I have that we worked on is there are 5 who are not known how supportive they are, and then another 3 that were very supportive. So it's not an overwhelmingly large number. And there may be, if there's a landowner that's just absolute no, and maybe for good reasons, or maybe just their preference, then at that point, there could be variations on routes further. We've tried to pick the most feasible for those environmental reasons and topography, but.
We recognize that this is going to be a long-term project to get it all worked out. And one goal that we have is that it could be put in, whether it's the comprehensive plan or something within Freeport, that as people try to develop that property, that we know that we want to have a bike path somewhere along Route 1 that's off-road, so that it could be built into the future changes that Freeport will experience.
Hi, I'm Kim True. I'm also on both Complete Streets and the Connect Freeport. And I think it's important to note that if we were to go with the off-road path, which would be supported by both the East Coast Greenway and the Casco Bay Trail, there would be a trail that would be used for all 3 purposes, the town of Freeport recreational, as well as the East Coast Greenway and the Casco Bay Trail. It would be something that can be used for economic piece as well. As Barbara had mentioned with Doug Leland biking down in Massachusetts right now, this is something that is happening in areas all around the country where they're attracting cyclists and people who are looking for recreational opportunities to be able to be off-road. And we're doing it on the Eastern Trail down in Saco, down to, actually it's South Portland, down to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They have a 65-mile trail, and the economic development in that area for direct spending that is coming from the trail is $12.5 million a year of additional monies that are coming in to communities along that way. Another one, which is a more established, more popular one, is the Great Allegheny Passage, which is a 150-mile-long distance biking path that goes from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, Maryland, that generates $800,000 per mile in an annual impact, which is $121 million annually. How that is collected is for people who do it on for a day basis, right, riding it. They bring in, they spend $90 a day. If they're staying overnight, they drop into the community $496 on average per day. So that's money that goes right back into the communities who are along these pathways. And just to the north of us, the Trans-Canada Trail, which many of you may have heard about, but that has been revolutionary in what it's been doing to Canada and the tourism up there. It's a 28,000-kilometer trail that goes across Canada and connects 15,000 communities. The direct spending by users of the trail totals over $13 billion a year, which generates approximately $23.1 billion in total economic benefit in the country each year and supports 220,000 jobs. Now, this piece that we're looking to have go through Freeport would be something that would connect from Yarmouth up through to Brunswick, but it's in a bigger trail that was both the 62-mile Casco Bay Trail, but that's a part of the more than 2,000-mile trail that goes from Florida all the way up to Calais and would connect to other trails that will be eventually built across the country. So this is something that we have an opportunity to get to be a part of, but I think it's something that Freeport, with our Amtrak station that can so easily attract people from out of state to come up with their bicycles and to be able to hop on it for whatever segmented they want to do, would be able to pump money into the Freeport area. So I just want the council to be aware that this is something that's not just a small piece through Freeport, but it's part of a bigger plan that Freeport would be able to benefit from. So if you have any questions.
Thanks, Kim. I'm going out on a limb here, but I think you have 7 really solid votes here for making this trail happen. So I'm encouraged that the Complete Streets Committee has got it down to this level of detail, and please tell us what we can do to help move that along. We have 3 public workshops coming up for the comp plan later this month in early October, including future land use, which this would fall into. So we'd love to see some details of that come forward so we can make sure we capture that in the comp plan process. I don't know if members of the Complete Streets Committee want to add anything from the council?
I think the longer term, in terms of Complete Streets, as we've said, has done a lot of work to narrow this down. There's still a lot of work to do in terms of approaching landowners and getting those cost estimates from Tool. I think part of the reason for coming to council this evening is really to get the buy-in so that if there are concerns or feedback that would be important to address before we go and do those next steps, particularly around approaching landowners. I think the committee wants to know that there is interest from the council in continuing on this plan.
One thing I think it was identified early on the process, there are a number of grants and another out of the funding. So I think that's certainly an important part that should come hand in hand as we go down the road.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that, excuse me, I'm a little sick today, but on the memo that we received for council, there was a JPCOG planning grant that was part of the process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
That was what Lucy's presentation was. So that grant helped fund Lucy's presentation, essentially. So at this point,
The report will contain a lot of information on further grants that can help the town pay for the work of more final design and construction.
but ultimately, Complete Streets is advocating for an off-road trail.
And one more point to add on these 3 alternatives. I think it's important to note that it's possible to move forward on the off-road trail, and because there are so many cut downs, meaning places where people could get from an off-road trail back to Route 1, that it's possible to do this over time, where it would be off-road and then coming back down to Route 1 if we didn't have permission from a landowner, and then go up Route 1 on the bike lane that is already there, and then move back up to an area where you can access an off-road trail again. This is the way it's often done in many other places where there's a challenge that's posed by a particular landowner. So it doesn't have to mean that you have all of the permissions all the way across in order for this to happen. And you'll see that on this here. It shows how it's going back down to Route 1 and then coming back up. So that is an alternative.
Great. Great.
I just want to voice support for it. I've been on a number of these trails in different places in different states and a couple of countries, and it's fantastic. I think it'll be a huge boon to Freeport if we can do it off-road. I know it's not easy, and I know there are probably some literal roadblocks that we might have to deal with. I think having that vision is important, to have the off-road vision and say that's what we would prefer to do, even if it means we can only do 85% of it today and finish the last 15% another time. So big supporter, whatever we can do to help, I'm all in.
Okay, great. Thank you guys very much.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Great. Well, thanks to the Complete Streets, great work, and thank you all for the presentation this evening. It's very informative. Appreciate your patience, and thanks very much. Please make sure you send a rep to the comp plan meetings coming up on the 23rd and the 7th, and I can't remember the date of the third one, so that we can make sure that this gets in bold print right into the comp plan. Thanks. All right.
Thank you all for your time.
Yep, thank you,
Thank you,
Lucy.
Lucy.